Welcome everyone who are joining us to this webinar in which Celsia is going to be providing the results and the outcomes of the first quarter of the year. We will be starting 5 minutes, and we will be also streaming through the Twitter space of Celsia for whoever wants to join us through that channel. So we will be starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Energía, somos energía, y todo el mundo aquí suma, lo que hace mi gente suma, la energía que tú quieres suma, y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah, dale sin miedo y suma, haz lo que tú quieres suma, las caras de mi gente suman, solo baila libre y suma, yeah, energía, energía, somos energía, 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 somos energía, energía, y todo el mundo aquí suma, lo que hace mi gente suma, la energía que tú quieres suma, y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah, dale sin miedo y suma, haz lo que tú quieres suma, las caras de mi gente suman, solo baila libre y suma, yeah, energía, energía, somos energía, 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 somos energía, energía, y todo el mundo aquí suma, lo que hace mi gente suma, la energía que tú quieres suma, y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah, dale sin miedo y suma, haz lo que tú quieres suma, las caras de mi gente suman, solo baila libre y suma, yeah, energía, energía, somos energía, 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 somos energía, energía, y todo el mundo aquí suma, lo que hace mi gente suma, la energía que tú quieres suma, y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah, dale sin miedo y suma, todo el mundo aquí suma. Lo que hace mi gente suma. La energía que tú quieres suma. Y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah. Dale sin miedo y suma. Haz lo que tú quieres suma. Las ganas de mi gente suman. Solo baila libre y suma, yeah. Energía, yeah. Energía, yeah. Somos energía, yeah. Energía, yeah, yeah. Energía, yeah. Energía, yeah. Somos energía, yeah. Energía, yeah, yeah. Y todo el mundo aquí suma. Lo que hace mi gente suma. La energía que tú quieres suma. Y cuando bailas libre suma, yeah. Dale sin miedo y suma. Haz lo que tú quieres suma. Las caras de mi gente suman. Solo baila libre y suma, yeah. Energía, yeah. Energía, yeah. Somos energía.
Good morning to everyone joining us through the different channels. I'm Gonzalo Velasquez, Communications Leader in Celsia, and I would like to welcome all of you to the first quarter results. Today we're joined by Ricardo Celsia and Esteban Piedrahita, directors of the company. In this moment, everyone is in listening mode, and at the end of the conference, we will have a Q&A. There is a Q&A box available in Zoom. We're also live streaming through Twitter Spacers. We had some technical issues at the beginning, but now everything is solved. So welcome everyone joining us through Twitter. This webinar has simultaneous interpretation from Spanish to English. If you're using a computer, you can select the language, otherwise, and you can click in the interpretation button on the Zoom toolbar. You can also do so in your mobile phone. Both cases, if you don't wish to hear the background audio, you can click mute original audio. Thank you, and Ricardo, it's all yours. Take it away. Thank you, Gonzalo, and everyone. We're sorry for the delay in the start. There were a couple of technical issues here. We had to set up the Twitter space, but everything's working now, I'm being told. Okay, so let's continue. Well, today we will be talking a little bit about the first quarter of this year, and we will also be talking about the several sales of assets in Central America. We will be summarizing about these assets. First of all, in 2014, trying to diversify and risk and currency, we acquired GDF Suez, Dos Mares, and PEG, which is the wind power plant in Costa Rica. This cost, the equity that we put up was 424 billion pesos in 2014. This is what we call the tip of the spear to internationalize the company. We know that in the case of PEG, we had reversal of the assets to the ICE in 2028. This means it's like a bond. Also in Dos Mares, the hydraulic plant in Costa Rica, the contract was going to expire in 2023, which implied that it would change to sales in the spot market. The other asset that we had was Bahía Las Minas, BLM, and we had the challenge of transforming it technologically and financially. However, this was really difficult. There was a coal plant, and you know that this is being decommissioned. And throughout all these years, due to the energetic mix in Panama, this ended up in the liquidation process in 2021. We had BLM as a partner. We had the Panama government with 50%. We have 8 years of presence in the region. That doesn't finish with this operation. This is very important. This is a decision not to go away from Central America, but to stay in Central America with other type of operation. So let's look at the summary of what we achieved during these years. We acquired Dos Mares with an annual generation of around 350 gigawatts per year. In 2021, we achieved 500 gigawatts hour year. And if we hadn't had the ST phenomena in September that year, we would have closed with a generation between 500 and 550 gigawatts hour. This means from the operational perspective, we achieved an improvement in the operation of 50%, which is marvelous. We also managed to jump into the B2B in Panama, which is basically innovation. There's practically no B2B in Panama. And we signed 32 contracts with big customers. Additionally, we started to build a solar portfolio in Panama with 2 plants that add up to 19.7 megawatts. We also built what we call a portfolio of new businesses. Currently, we have, and this is within the company, 34 megawatts of solar power systems between Panama and Honduras. By the end of the year, we will almost double that figure. We will reach 55 megawatts. And we want to reach 200 megawatts in the coming 2 years. All of this was achieved without deploying additional equity on behalf of Celsia, more than the 424 billion pesos that we initially gave in 2014. In spite of achieving the plan, there were several factors that had an impact on profitability on the invested capital on these acquired assets that initially set it 600 points under the ROCE of Colombia. Among them, the lower energy prices. This is what had the biggest impact in the projection and profitability. The lower prices in energy, and with the coming of liquefied gas in the generation, because this basically reduced the price of energy for the spot. The terms of the PPAs and the lack of long-term bidding that didn't allow us to hire the assets, giving the existence of signed contracts, but that hadn't been executed due to the plans that the Panama government never canceled. So all of this made it that our profitability scenarios were lower. And in spite of the operational improvements, this was an asset that wasn't profitable within Celsia assets. So we not only have this situation, but having that invested capital in that plant is a cost of opportunity that's very high, which is why several months ago we started this transaction. This started more or less a year ago. We've decided to turn around this asset and transform it into other things. So let's look into how is it that we can perfect this sale, and how is it that we're going to achieve important changes in the consolidated financial results in Celsia. First, the perceived value of the sales is going to be $194 million. So around 933 billion pesos. This will strengthen the liquidity of Celsia SA, and the cash that will be received from this transaction will represent practically 30% of the capitalization of the market of the company, considering the price in the market value yesterday, in the stock market yesterday. This is astonishing. Unfortunately, this price doesn't really reflect the reality, and you can look at the cash flow that we would have in a couple of months. Additionally to these resources, we can reduce indebtedness the company in $198 million and reaching a value of 4.78 billion pesos. Sorry, trillion pesos, and a net leverage of 2.93 times the EBITDA. And this is going to be 2.14, what we were discussing. So it's going to be a value that is going to be extremely good, this figure. So we're having practically 933 billion pesos in cash for the company. And additionally, it will allow us to lower almost $200 million the debt. The sale was performed in the high multiple range, considering that the assets don't have long-term contracts and the BOT of PG in 2028. So the multiple that was calculated for the EBITDA with the normalized EBITDA is 11.5 times. This means that we will improve the ROCE consolidated of Celsia in 400 base points, overcoming or being above 18%. This means that the invested capital is being really profitable. Finally, I would like to highlight our strategy in the region and what assets we will have in the region. And several shareholders were asking about this. So we will have a thermal asset in Colón of 154 megawatts. It has a strategic location. We have a very valuable asset, which is the Bahía Las Minas substation. So we hope that in the future we will develop options with technological conversion and see what kind of work can we do with that plant to see if in the future we might make that plant improve new technology and participate in new biddings that the Panama government will be doing in coming months. Additionally, we will have a project in Costa Rica that we were developing in a land next to the wind power plant. This is a project that has what in Costa Rica is called eligible. This means that it can become part of a bidding, a public bidding, and we have 60 megawatts in eolic projects where we can participate. We are structuring that project. Additionally, as I was telling you, we're going to have, or today we have 34 megawatts with solar panels. We're building additional 21 megawatts. And with the pipeline that we have in Honduras and Panama, very strong in Honduras, in 2 years, we will reach around 200 megawatts. And before we continue with that perspective, Esteban is going to tell us about the profitability of the business and how are the figures, how it's the closure of the books and a little bit what we're going to see. Because as you know, we have to pay a lot of attention to this. So Esteban, go ahead. Thank you, Ricardo. First of all, I would like to greet and welcome everyone joining us. First, I would like to mention an important detail that we have with Efragen. It implies a fixed price with the assets, and the benefits and risk for 2023 will run on behalf of the buyer. This means that for 2022, when we reclassify the assets and passive available for sale. So by the end of 2022, the assets minus the passives added up to 1.8 billion. And the difference in the ORI is 884 billion, with which we will receive around 933 billion, closing with the rate of 2022. The net countable profitability or utility would be around 17 billion. And these figures will depend on the fluctuation of the representative market exchange rate. And I would like to start with the figure that Ricardo was giving, which is how much did we invest? So we invest 424 billion pesos in 2014. We are receiving now 933 billion pesos in cash after reducing the debt, as we were mentioning, and we are continuing investments that were built with this that is around 127 billion pesos that correspond to what Ricardo was mentioning, our investment in solar power in Honduras, eligibility in Costa Rica, and so on. And this would give us that a profitability from December 2014 to the closure of those assets was around 12.9%. Thank you, Esteban. I would like to add another thing important, which is the multiple of the transaction of the sale. The EBITDA for 2023 that was expected was around $33 million, which represents a multiple in EV/EBITDA of 11.5 times. This is a multiple that it's really within the higher range of percentages. Now, considering everything, the investment in these assets makes all the sense for the company. And this will make that the growth abroad will be under platforms just like what we're doing in Colombia. So we'll be focusing in the non-regulated market with solar power. And we have already determined that for the next 3 years, we will multiply almost 4 times the capacity in Central America, jumping from 55 megawatts to 200 megawatts. We will also assess projects in infrastructure, both in distribution as in transmission. One instance can be the fourth line in Panama, or the participation in bidding in Costa Rica for renewable generation. So all of these with this platform concept that we have in Colombia. Additionally, business category, which is framed in a broad concept of energetic efficiency, in which we are emphasizing a lot. We're strengthening. We want to work with our teams in Central America. Also, part of the resources that we will be receiving, we will be allocating them to reacquisition of shares, reinforcing the message that the object was to do this without going into debt. This is a mandate from our shareholders that was decided during the recent assembly, and Santiago Arango will be talking about that. So we will be giving estimates on when can we participate in the market. Now, let's jump to the positive results of the first quarter of 2023. The EBITDA was 514 billion with a growth of 13% compared to the same period previous year. The net consolidated earning was in 122 billion. That was affected in an important due to the increase in the financial cost product of the increasement in the index. We had new assets in infrastructure and generation. This means that the EBITDA, when considering the platform, reaches 605 billion pesos, registering an increase of 22% compared to the same quarter of the previous year. When comparing, we're talking about 90 billion pesos in the quarterly EBITDA platform. This means that this is becoming a very important business, which is almost 22% of the consolidated EBITDA. Caoa, which is the transmission platform, had a growth of 33.1% in income, 32.9% in EBITDA. This platform has an average of assets of 22.1 years, and today we have assets for 2.06 trillion pesos. The C2 energy is growing significantly, and it went to 17 billion pesos, so it's almost 14 billion pesos in the EBITDA. We had an operation of 166 megawatts, and we are currently building 133 megawatts. Recently, commercial operations were declared the Lanceros, the San Felipe, and we're about to declare 5 other plants to strengthen our presence in the market. This project gives competitiveness to the companies. They generate a lot of local employment during construction, and they also avoid CO2 emissions. El Tesorito thermal platform gives us all the backup to the non-renewable business. And this first quarter 2023 generated a EBITDA of around 35 billion pesos. Laurel, the platform for solar energy at small scale, generated incomes for over 3 billion pesos and an EBITDA of 1.4 billion pesos. So we're very proud about the results. And obviously, we're addressing all the risks. We're managing all the risks that we can find in the country. So, Esteban, if you'd like, let's talk a little bit about the financial figures. As you know, the detailed analysis of the results, and for more financial information, you can look into the reports that you will find in the investors' website. The first quarter, the consolidated income added up to 1.5 trillion pesos. The operations in Colombia reached incomes of 1.35 trillion, representing 90%, and Central America added 145 billion, adding 10%. In Colombia, the income were boosted by a generation for the charge of reliability due to the income to the operation of Tesorito. We also registered an increase in the income for use and connection in networks with a higher IPP and IPC. Here, I would like to make a comment that I think we've never done it, which is the platforms in Celsia, Colombia represent all the platforms. So through the incomes, we will see the total incomes of the platforms, even when each platform will have its corresponding share. But you will be seeing the total incomes from the platforms with that representation that Celsia Colombia has. In Central America, the incomes in dollars decreased 31% and 17% in pesos compared to the same quarter the previous year. So it's very important to mention the behavior of the income is mainly due to the culmination of the contract of the Dos Mares complex, and in this operation also meant that all the income is coming from the spot market sales. And we also have the SD phenomenon. Now, in costs, in sales costs, this reached 995 billion, so an increase in 30%, mainly due to the higher purchases of energy, the exchange rate, and also what I was mentioning previously to the different platforms that Ricardo was mentioning, and you can see the sizes, the EBITDA sizes that they are achieving. The administrative costs reach 83 billion, 5.6%. This means 700 base points below the inflation of the last 12 years. As Ricardo was mentioning, the EBITDA reached 514 billion pesos. We register a growth of 13%, led mainly by the positive contribution of all the businesses in Colombia. The EBITDA margin of the quarter was 34.1%. The EBITDA, the individual Colombian EBITDA was 472 billion pesos, and the Central American operation had 42 billion pesos. So this is the operational side of things. And as you can see, we had excellent results. Now let's talk about what's below the operational line. And there are 2 points that we want to make. First, the net financial cost reached 222 billion, out of which 140% were financial, and this is increasing 140% due mainly to the increase of the indexators in this last year and the interest rates of the Bank of the Republic that has increased the line of the CPI. This is correlated to the readjustment of the income in the regular business. And when we do the match between what the operational line growth with those index and what's the index are growing in financial costs, we have a balance of almost net of those two figures. That's why we have this strategy. The income taxes were 64 billion in the quarter, and they were reduced 31.6%. We were able to mitigate the impact of the tax reform of the last year, thanks that we've been incorporating the tax benefits, thanks to the solar power plants that were started operating last year. We had a positive contribution of the different segments last year to a net profit of 122 billion pesos, a reduction of 26.3% compared to the same period last year, due to the financial cost and to the effects of the PAC for tariff justice in the income generation, transmission, and distribution. The net profits of the owners of the controller were 75 billion. Now, the consolidated debt was 5.7 trillion pesos and a leverage of 2.89 times net debt to EBITDA. The half-life of the company is 5.6 years. We closed the cash with a consolidated cash around 382 billion pesos. Compared to the first quarter, without considering those assets that will be de-invested, the main figures would be as follows, so that you can see the impact of this investment. The income would be 1.4 trillion, so it would reduce. We will see a reduction of 5%. The EBITDA would be 476 billion, a reduction in 7%, and the financial cost would be 209 billion. That means 10%. The total indebtedness would be 4.78 trillion, and as Ricardo was mentioning, the leveraging of the net indebtedness would be 2.93 times. So with that, we will close the financial figures. Great, Esteban. So later we will be talking a little bit about the questions on that thing on how is it that things would be comparable and the picture after the sale. So the operational results are still very positive, and they reflect the good rhythm that we have. The projects focused on clean energies, the development of new products, and energetic efficiency for customers start to become more important. The investment of assets in Central America will allow us to strengthen many aspects and to consolidate a strategy that will set us in a path for the future of the company. Now, jumping to the projects, we would like to tell you in the first months of the year, we started the operation of 7 solar power plants. For these, we will be providing energy to the national integrated systems. It's a total of 89 megawatts of renewable capacity. Before we finish, let's mention some things on the ESG sides. On the works per taxes, we were able to finished a rural way, or we paved a rural road. So the investment closed in 29.5 billion pesos. This is wonderful for this part of the country. In La Guajira, we built and we delivered to the community multiple classrooms, and we hope that 180 kids from Uribia and their neighboring communities to come in. This is the second educational infrastructure work that we've done after the one in Calalu. So this is a safe classroom with solar power, bathrooms, kitchens, and it's an area that it's really beautiful. That was really well designed and painted. And during this quarter, we handed out 24,000 scholar kits. So imagine 24,000 kids with their school kids, and they can. This was in Tolima, Valle, Cauca, Córdoba, Santander, and the alliance between Reverdece program and Grupo Éxito. They plant over 1 million trees, more than 270,000 clients made their donations in supermarkets, and we were able to achieve, but not only that, but go over the goal that we had. And recently we started the partnership with Public, and we will be restoring 30 hectares in the Otun River Basin in Risaralda. We hope to plant 100,000 native trees. So we're planting almost 3 million native trees a year. With the internet business, the company had the intention to connect all educational institutions in Valle del Cauca and Tolima for free. Up to date, we have connected 211 schools. This is incredible. 211 schools that have high-speed optic fiber internet. So this means 114,000 students from lower income. And this is just the cherry on the cake, but it's important to mention because all of us who are part of Celsia enjoy from all of this, and we're very committed to ESG. So now we can jump into the Q&A. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Esteban. So now we will be opening the space for questions. The people who are connected in Zoom, you can raise your hand. We are seeing some people with their hands raised, and we also have some Q&A, some questions in the Q&A box. So we will be starting. We have a first question from Jose Hurtado. He's asking information on the estimated semestral repurchase of shares in the Bogota stock market. So Santiago and Esteban, if we can make a quick summary of this, of what we had in the shareholders meeting, what is it that we're doing, what are the expectations, and what's going on there? Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Santiago. So let's remember that in the past shareholders meeting, we had an approval of repurchase of shares, which will have two mechanisms. The first one is transactional, which is through the Colombian stock market, and the other one is the independent mechanism, which is outside of this market. We are starting, and it's important to remember that we had a time where we couldn't start the process until we presented the results, which we did yesterday, and what we're doing today. So formally, as of today, we can start the formal corresponding process. We already started with the Colombian stock market. We had sent a letter for the legal representation and what's going on. We need to coordinate with the stock market and then publish the information that is relevant. We also have to remember that this transactional cannot go outside of the minimum and maximum limits. This means this is a completely regulated mechanism, and we cannot change the price. We are finishing with this, and we hope that in a couple of weeks we will have all the mechanism ready so that we can start with the transactional operation. After we have discussed it and structured with the board of directors, we will start with the independent mechanism. Yeah, so for Jose, yeah, we're really eager to start that program. As we promised, we will be setting up communication channels for the transaction with the shareholders in general, so that you know how is it that we are approaching this, how is it that we're behaving with the market. Okay, so we can continue. Thank you, Ricardo. There's a person with their hand raised, Roberto Paniagua. So Roberto, go ahead. You can activate your microphone. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, Roberto, we can hear. Good morning, Ricardo and everyone. Thank you for the results. The music in the beginning was really cool. A couple of questions, brief questions. So it was an excellent lecture. First, regarding the transaction in Central America, we have an EBITDA. I don't know if you have the figure of the purchase of EBITDA in 2014. The second one is in transactions Central America. Can you remind me the MOIC of the transaction? This is the first thing. And the second thing is something key that you've mentioned in the previous webinar was El Niño. If you can tell us a little bit on the strategy that you're going to be implementing to manage risks and also to have a profitability in the market. These are the two main things that I wanted to ask. So I would like to know more on this. Thank you. Yeah, Roberto, yes. Thank you for the comment on the music. Yes, I would like to tell you, Esteban, you asked on something that we haven't talked about the MOIC, which is the profitability over capital, right? Yeah, as I understand it, in equity is just basically the total of money invested compared to the total of money that I receive. Yeah, so I'll let Esteban start with that, and then we'll talk about the other thing. Sorry, give me a second. I was calculating the MOIC really quick here. So Roberto, if my memory serves me right, but at that time when we came into Central America, we had a multiple of around 9.5 times, 9.6 times the EBITDA, something like that. And as Ricardo was mentioning, it was a really different thing. We had to do a combined multiple of the transaction at the time, but basically we had the replication of the asset total. And it's important to consider that at that time, the price in Panama was around $180 per watt in Panama. Nowadays, that price is around $70. So it's a significant structural change. The second thing is that LATIR, as we were discussing, we had a LATIR of 12.5%, considering the income into equity, but this is an equity transaction. And as we were telling you, it was 400 billion that we invest, and now we're getting 900 billion. And now we're having also with assets that are around 127 billion that was built with the same cash flow. So we have a tier of 12.9. And as we were estimating, this would give an order of 2.3 times when we add the 900 billion, so the assets, and if we divide it on the 424 billion, we're talking about 2.3 times the MOIC, which I will be writing down so that we will continue doing it in further census. Now, regarding El Niño phenomenon, we're like traumatized from 2015 and 2016. If you remember, there was a regulatory issue during that time when El Niño came, and it was linked to fuels that was not related to the gas, to the fuels that was using in 2016. So it was extremely low price, and we were producing at an extremely high cost. And this led to a financial crisis of the thermal sector that was corrected by adjusting to the real price that is used. This is now being regulated. So what's the coverage here? First, we've done a very thorough exercise from our generation teams by estimating our generation capacity in a very critical scenario. So remember that to calculate the energies in Colombia, you need to take the historic, take the lowest or the most critical scenario, and then you calculate from there. Now, from that perspective, the contract that we have is around 85 to 90% is, we can say, of our EFIC in what's coming up. But I believe, as Roberto is mentioning, this Niño phenomenon, we're seeing that the temperature of the ocean is setting a historic figure. We've never seen such a high temperature. So this is not an indicator that it's going to be strong or weak Niño, but we have to prepare for the worst case scenario. So we have that coverage. We have other contracts and other structures that allows us to cover this. So I'm going to give you a detail, and Esteban, please help me with this. The first is that we have a purchase options in Zona Franca in free trade flores, thermoflores, of around $30 million that can be executed during times like this, where the prices can be critical. This is one coverage. Another coverage that we have that for us is fundamental or structural is the El Tesorito platform. As you can see, the EBITDA in the first quarter was an EBITDA of almost 34 billion pesos. And this is thanks to take high margin prices in stock. If there is no change in regulation, but we need to set up an alarm system here, because what we're getting from the ministry with the El Niño, with the dispatch of resources, can generate a big distortion. So hopefully we will be patient with this. We will review the figures and take the best decisions, because we don't know how El Niño is going to look like. So Tesorito provides a protection that is really robust in terms of expected results, so that we can compensate with any issues that might arise. Thank you, Ricardo, for your answer. But look, Roberto, and I thank you for the comment. The problem is that we don't have energy in this country. If you try to buy energy, no one's going to sell it, because everyone is preparing for El Niño. So you have to understand this. And here I would like to do some education. The prices in stock are going to rise because we need to save water for what's coming. So we need to get the resources from the thermal part. So when the stock prices are high, it's not that it's a speculation. No, is that we're saving water because El Nino is coming at the end of this year and the beginning of the next year. And this is something that is really important. And let's remember that the prices in stock only have an impact on 7.5% of the net tariff of a Colombian receives. This means those headlines that are really scandalous, you need to really look into it. For El Valle Tolima, we see a coverage of practically 100% in the generation contracts. So each trader has a special situation. So in El Valle Tolima, prices can really go up, but we have a management there, and the energy has already been purchased. Also, if you can give me a view on those prices and those stock prices when El Nino comes, if you have anything to mention there. It's really difficult. Now, the price in the scarcity is really low. This means that if the cost of energy goes over this, it's up to 1,200 pesos per kilowatt in the most extreme scenario. But I would like to here do a PSA. We need to continue exploring gas because look at the importance of Tesorito. Tesorito can produce energy between 300 and 400 pesos per kilowatt. And if we have to import gas, that multiplies the price 3 or 4 times. So we need to continue with the exploration here so that we can continue with those prices and those rates. Thank you, Roberto. So next we will have questions from Juan F. Pulgarin. Which new sources of income do you have you foreseen to replace those incomes that the companies that you were selling in Central America will do? Here, we are not forecasting an immediate replacement. We will have development projects, as we're telling you, with the solar projects. We will be participating in transmission lines and distribution assets, and a lot of things in energetic efficiency. So there's a bunch of things there. Now, at the level of the works that we're doing outside of Colombia is to continue pursuing those businesses in an active manner. So, for instance, if we have we end up with a transmission line, these are very relevant. So we're looking to those new platforms in which Celsia provides a part of the equity, and we bring investors so that we can continue with the expansion and growth. And the other thing is that we're not only be subscribing to countries like Panama and Honduras and Costa Rica, but we're looking into options in other countries. And here, to complement Ricardo's answer, I think that we're seeing a change in the trend, just like the one that we seen in 2014. So we had a very strong activity, and we were looking to many countries. And we'll remember that we picked some countries over others because of prices at the time. And now, more than the economic situation, there's been a change in trades in all of the markets. And we know that more beyond Central America, there are other markets in the region, because even the US is going back to scenarios that are interesting. So we're looking into that from this perspective, with this vision. how is it that we can deploy those resources in the smartest way so that we can have a return on investment that will be worth it. Also from Juan Fernando Pulgarin. What is the budget for income in 2023, and what's the goal that you've set it as dividends per share, for the 2023 operation? So the goal that we have, and we were talking about this the previous meeting, is in line with the incomes of the last year. So we're talking about around more than 5.6 trillion pesos. And for guidance for dividends per share, there's no one. And we have the acquisition of shares. The buyback. The next question is the big question, which is what should we tell our friends to convince them to invest in Celsia? I think that Celsia has a playing margin that is really broad. So one thing is to sign, the other thing is to close, but we hope to have that check by the end of the year. But having $1 billion in cash, a trillion pesos in cash is something that it's really nice, right? Second is here's a detail that's very important. The ROCE that we have in Celsia is around 18%. This is what we are achieving. We demand a lot from the profitable side of things. So yeah, we're doing a very nice work on the platforms that has generated a lot of profitability. Remember that a platform like the one in Caoa, we invested 500 billion pesos then we incorporated assets from Tolima that we had buy at a really good price. We recover all the equity and we end up with 50% of the company. So it's a company that's producing around 300 billion pesos in EBITDA per a year. So this is just to give you an idea of the capacity of playing, of moving in this company. And we created a business like the one of the optic fiber internet. This is creating a highway for all the clients in Tolima and El Valle to bring other products. And we have the good news that this is an internal startup, and this month looks like we will have a positive EBITDA this month. So this is something that's really interesting. The support that we have from banks, multilateral entities to do things in Colombia and outside it's very relevant. And for the hard times, because this government it's like if you like cycling, it's one of those those cobblestone stages, and that's what the government is doing, is taking us to one of those stages. Please don't doubt in investing in Celsia. And the door of the elevator has opened, as Gonzalo would say. Now we will give the floor to Sebastián Gallego. He has a question via Zoom. So go ahead, Sebastián. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, Sebastián. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask about three things. The first one is regarding the Acacia and Camellias projects. I would like to hear from you what's the progress on those projects according to the numbers that you were talking, and the estimate the start of operation would be around December. But if you could tell us a little bit about the advances and what are the expectations there. Second one is regarding the usage of the transaction resources. You mentioned that the buyback is 300 million pesos. So I wanted to understand a little bit, considering that you're closing the transaction, the additional resources left from the acquired resource and from the acquisition or the buyback, what would be used for? And the third question is regarding regulatory risk that you mentioned the previous meeting. I wanted to know from your perspective, what are the main worries? What are your main concerns with the government plan? And additionally, how is the tariff review that's still ongoing? Thank you. Yes, Sebastian. So they're very good questions. So we will rephrase and we will repeat them. So the first one is, what's going on with the Guajira project? That's basically the question. So first, we've been working in La Guajira for 5-6 years. What is it that we're facing right now? First, there are previous consultations that we haven't been able to close, basically because the requests that we're receiving are outside of any economical logic. And there's an additional figure, which is a proportionality test, which is if I already closed 10 previous consultations and there's a new one that I can close, well, then the government has a mechanism that it's a proportionality test. Unfortunately, this government hasn't helped with this test. They don't want to do them, this proportionality test. The second one is that the environmental study for the license was filed for the transmission line that we were doing, and not just to us, but many other of the players with different consultants and advisors that have had those lines, and we really don't understand what's going on there. Because what normally happens is that the ANLA, the national agency, allows for changes, but now they're filing them. They just are closing them. So basically, it's just starting from zero. This takes other 8 months, 12 months to develop this process with the new vision that the agency has. But yeah, we're having those delays. And there are many things that are stopping the progress. And yeah, it's a 2-year delay compared to what we had estimated. And what has happened, Sebastian, is that in the news, we're seeing the big problems like the Enel plant have, that they have all the permits. They started construction a year and a half ago. And from the news, what I've seen is that it's been able only to operate for 50% of the time. So the advance, it's minimum, and we're considering retiring. They're considering retiring from La Guajira based on what we're seeing on the news. So it's a very delicate situation, even that, which is really hard to work without the permits. So this is a call for the national government that they should be mediators, that they should conciliate if we want wind power to come into the region. I just wanted to add the delay in the permits. We have acacias and camellias. For acacias, that has to be done with Corcor Guajira. And from 2021, we filed the request for the environmental license. Sorry, in 2022. Sorry, by the end of 2021. And as of today, we haven't received any notice on that. So this makes these types of projects really difficult. And it's important to mention that within the line or within the general project, we have over 120 previous consultations that we develop all of them, and we only have 2 to execute. And it's because of these 2 consultations out of 120 that we haven't been able to obtain the license. So it's worrisome to see the rates at which the government is conducting this process. And also the delays in the transmission connections. Even when we had everything solved, we're not going to start the construction until we have everything ready there. So everything was estimated to start by the end of 2021, and now we're estimating that it will start by the end of 2024. So we're facing a hard technical reality because a park that could be built in 8 months, but this delays is basically out of everything that we've mentioned. So Sebastian, as you can see, we will continue working in those licensing procedures, continue working and seeing how is it that we can move towards the wind power projects in the region. So if we cannot do it in La Guajira, we'll have to look somewhere else. Now, let's talk about the National Development Plan really quick. This National Development Plan is going through a very complex situation, which is that it's making that the wind and solar project that was something that this government wanted to do, they put a break to it and no one understands why. And I'm telling you, they're putting a lot of cost there. So this has 2 ways to balance the equation. First, there are projects that we will be closed, and there are other projects that we will have to readjust with the prices so that the profitability will, so that we can pay to the banks, that we can pay cost of operation, and we can see the return on investment, and we can pay to the shareholders, and also pay tax, which is something really important here in this country. So this will make the prices of some projects go up. This means more expensive energy for Colombian, and some other projects will be canceled. This is a news that for me, specifically for me in particular, it's really sad. So there's a lot of in this country they're talking from the renewal sector that with this that most of the profits will end up for the government or paid in taxes. So adding that in the tax reform, they put the minimum income the law, which was 17.5, which was something that the Santos had achieved, that the Duque administration had reviewed, adjust to make it easier for the projects to be done. Unfortunately, in 8 months of this administration, that law is just a piece of paper now. So now, Esteban, if we can talk about the usage of resources. Now, as Sebastian was mentioning, is to do the buyback, which is 600 billion pesos. The rest are going to be resources that will be available so that the board of directors can decide on which of the alternatives, what is it that we can do with these resources that we're receiving from this. But for now, we have the reacquisition, the leverage in the short term, so that we can continue with the process of improving the organization. So thank you, Esteban. There are a lot of questions regarding Guajira, so I think that the topic was already addressed. We also talked about El Niño. So now we will, from Ana Huasca. She's asking about the indicator to index the energy rates. Are you expecting to have it this year? Yeah, when we do it by the increase that due to geopolitical factors, there was an adjustment in the CPI. So yeah, the war on Ukraine, the price tariffs, all of that. And typically the Colombian regulation for the CPI, which had been favorable for the users and the clients in the last 20 years, was changed. So we did the adjustment, and today, until November, we have the CPI or the PPI, and it's the way to adjust the rate in those components, in the distribution components, because some come from generation. That's what we have today, and today we're seeing that the PPI is decreasing. It's an understanding that the government is calculating a new index for the sector. And what's important is to have an index that reflects the increase of the cost in the sector. So 30 years ago, before the big blackout, the rates in Colombia were determined by what was called the National Rate Board. So it was basically a meeting from technical parts, but the politicians were the ones who set the agenda for those price increases. And obviously the incentive from the politicians is different from the one of the technicians. And the rates in Colombia never had or never considered and never covered the cost of the service. So hopefully we will have, with an index in consensus, that will allow to keep the cost of service, and it won't generate any issues in the future. And here I'll make a PCA. Doing an analysis of the rates in Latin America, Colombia is the 4th or 5th lowest in the region. The ones that are above us are the ones that are the countries that have taken the decision of reducing the cost of utilities, and what they have achieved is that the electrical systems are a disaster, like Venezuela, Argentina. They have blackout after blackout. And what is it that have to be done. First, the appliances get damaged. Second, you need to have a compensation with backup stations or plants, small generations, like the ones when for those of us who are old enough, you remember that there was a lot of power plants, of generators out on the street, and Juan Mosquera these days was remembering the during those 10, 11-month years, the meals taste like oil because we had to cook with oil, with gas. So we need a technical indexator, right? And we hope that's the case. There's a couple of questions on CapEx. How much is that you're going to be investing? So first, we had a perspective. We're looking to the CapEx really closely. The CapEx that we're developing are CapEx that are first regarding regulation, second one, efficiency and productivity, and third, the projects that first are closed within the financial system, but have a guarantee of the availability and willingness of investment from our board. This has reduced a lot the volume of investment. And I don't know, Esteban, if you would like to talk about that. So in the meeting that we had in March, it's around 2.1, 2.3 trillion pesos. So yeah, there was a reduction in the investments that were planned for this year. We haven't adjusted those figures, those numbers. Thank you, Esteban. So overall, we've covered all the questions. There's one from Jorge Cruz, and he's asking, what's the percentage of thermal generation, especially with coal? We're no longer generating with coal. We're zero coal. Today, basically, we have the backup generation with 2 plants, which is the one that we have in Barranca, which basically is turned on when there are moments of really high prices or when we experience like El Niño phenomenon. And the other one is Tesorito. And in Tesorito, we have the most efficient plant in the system. And I dare say it's a new generation plant. It's last technology. It's a low emission. And the other thing that we have is that really important is that for the mouth of the well. This means there's no problems of regassing. There's no issues of leaks in the transportation. So it's the most efficient thing that you can have in terms of gas generation. Is what we have. And I would like to remind you all that we are a carbon neutral company, which is, we're the first company to be like that in the region. Thank you, Ricardo. So overall, we have addressed the questions. We've had 105 participants in Zoom and 64 people joining us via Twitter Space. So thank you all for joining us in this meeting. And I don't know, Ricardo, if you'd like to close with some parting words. Yeah, I would like just to mention that we're still studying and being very aware and managing the regulatory risks. As I've continually mentioned, in Celsia, we have the capacity to adapt and change. And we continue. There was a question on human talent. And yeah, all everyone in Celsia, we're committed to continue developing this line of work in renewable. The net promoter score that we have and our retail business is one of the highest, if not we double any competition in the country. So that's a big effort to provide a high quality service in spite of all the issues that come up. And also our energetic efficiency business is growing because it's not only with solar rooftops, but everything that we do inside of the companies, it's efficiency. So from compressed air, air conditioning, energy quality, illumination, engines, all of those types of things, we have the capacity to surveil, monitor, and run operations on that. So we have growth lines in operation that it's really beautiful. So there's a lot of opportunities with all of our clients, and we can open the frontiers to our working teams. And that's it. Thank you, Ricardo, Santiago, Esteban, to everyone who's joining us today. And in Twitter, we're trying to provide information, figures, data. So through Twitter, we have set it up threads to really show the reality of the energy sector in Colombia. And hopefully we will have you again with very good news in coming meetings. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Yeah.